Yeah, we are going to call the meeting to order. I want to welcome everyone to the October 2011 meeting of the Committee on Agency Operations. I would like to remind everyone that this meeting is being broadcasted via internet. This is my first meeting as the chair of the AOC. It is a privilege and honor to serve as the chair of this committee. And we have several new board members. They will be formally introduced tomorrow by Fred. And I know I had met most of them except Janelle. We welcome you, Janelle. And this is going to be very interesting work for all of you. I encourage everybody to ask questions, make comments, learn as much as you can, especially the new board members. I've been learning a whole lot since the last 2.5 years. First action item on the agenda is approval of the minutes of July 27th Committee on Agency Operations meeting.
Move to approve.
Do we have a second?
No, okay.
Oh,
I wasn't here.
Janelle moved. All in favor?
Aye.
Please. Aye. The minutes are passed. So we'll move to the next agenda item. For agenda item number 3, I would like to call Dr. Arturo Alonso to introduce the staff and topic of this meeting's report. He will give us some background information. These items require no action. Since we have some new board members, it will be a good idea to explain some of the acronyms. We use a lot of acronyms over here, and I'm still learning my acronyms since the last 2.5 years. Dr. Arturo, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Deputy Commissioner's report normally consists of 2 or 3 standing items, and then 2 or 3 items that are requested by the chair or another board member. I plan to give the final report on 2 of those standing items today, unless requested differently. Those 2 items that I plan for this to be the final reports are the ARRA, first acronym, which is the American Recovery Act, the stimulus funds that we were charged with administering. That will be the final report on that, and then an update on the facilities. This should be pretty close to the end. And then I'll have more on that in a minute. Today we will hear a report from on our loan program from Dan Weaver, one of our assistant commissioners, followed by 3 reports that I will present, and then we will conclude with another report from Sid Hodgkins, our other assistant commissioner, who will give you an update on the IT initiatives and the implementation of lean processes in his department. So with that, I turn it over to Mr. Dan Weaver for the first report, which is a report on loan operations. Dan?
So is this one going to come up? Maybe not. That's fine. Good afternoon. I'm Dan Weaver. I'm Assistant Commissioner for Business and Support Services. Although this doesn't require any action on your part, it might require some interaction on your part. So please ask questions along the way. A lot of the information I'm going to provide, we tried to make this very packed full of information so that you could take it home with you and have some nighttime reading. So I'm not going to go through all of the slides in their entirety, but it's good from a frame of reference standpoint for you to have this information available. So I'm going to give you a very much a broad stroking overview of the loan program, our statutory authority to operate the loan program, and some current issues that are at hand that are critical from an ongoing operational loan program, and kind of give you a sense of the scale and the size of the operation. And we may skip fairly quickly through some of these, not yet though. The loan program has been in existence since 1965. The first authorization for bonding authority was for $85 million. The loan program has been self-sustaining and self-supporting since that time. We've issued 6 other issues have come before voters over the last 45 years, the last one being in 2007, which was a $500 million capacity. The next to the bottom bullet is our current debt outstanding, which is about $799 million. Within our current authority that the voters put forward in 2007, we have about $275 million of remaining bonding capacity. Which brings me to the bottom bullet. As a result of the last session, SGR 50 was passed, which put a Proposition 3 on the ballot, which authorizes, should the voters approve, authorizes the coordinating board to issue bonds up to but not exceeding our previous bonding capacity, which in this case is $1.86 billion. Next. So we operate under 4 statutes. The one that's most intimate from a loan program operation standpoint is Chapter 52. We also fall underneath 3 other government codes that authorizes us and controls us from a bonding perspective. So that's 1371, 1372, and 1207. Next. And please interrupt if you have any questions. Chapter 52 limits our annual capacity to $125 million. That's broken up into a couple of different categories within the private activity bond allocation. Kind of skipping down, we're in a subceiling 2 with the Water Development Board and the Veterans Land Board. We share a capacity within the private activity bond allocation. Our portion of that is $75 million, and should there be excess capacity when the private activity bond allocation collapses, essentially, we can get an additional $50 million, which brings us to that $125 million capacity. Let's see. SB 1799 that was passed in the legislature authorizes a coordinating board on an annual basis to issue bonds up to $350 million, but we don't have any additional authority within our subceiling to go to that level. So we are still living within our $75 million capacity, but we would have a greater authority to issue bonds on a fiscal year basis should there be capacity that's available within the private activity bond allocation. So we're not getting carte blanche to go to $350 million. There still are limitations within what everybody else uses in the state that has access to that particular bonding authority. Yes?
It's on the ballot, maybe.
The one that's on the, they're kind of joined at the hip. SGR 50 is actually the legislation that passed that gave rise to Proposition 3. This is SB 1799, which expanded our annual limits that we have within Chapter 52. So they work in tandem with each other. They're not in isolation, I guess is the best way to put it. That answer your question? Okay.
Dan?
Sir.
When you talk about the private activity bonds, you say that we're coupled with the Water Development Board and the Veterans Land Board, but these private activity bonds, there's an aggregate amount available statewide?
There's a $3 billion, about $3 billion statewide. They're segregated into separate subceilings. We're in the state-voted subceiling with the Water Development Board and the Veterans Land Board. There are other subceilings that are dedicated to various other priorities that the state has on access to private activity bond allocation, tax-exempt bonding allocation, student lending. There's an alternative student lending subceiling that used to support the FELP program, which was the federal loan program that has subsequently been, I guess, canceled.
But as far as these 3, what is the limit for?
I think we're at 191 million. It's the next to the bottom bullet on that slide.
Sorry.
And it really depends on demand. So each particular issuer, if they have demand for their subsealing, they have access to that subsealing if they make application. If nobody makes application before August 15th of the fiscal year, then the remaining bonding authority essentially collapses and allows everybody a piece of the pie, which would be the point where we would have access to that $350 million capacity. So it really depends on what the other issuers in the state are doing. The last 3 years, due to the uncertainty in the municipal bond marketplace, there's a lot of capacity that's unused. Next slide. This is probably the most important slide. It's not the most fun slide that I have, but it's probably the most important slide. It's essentially the statement within Chapter 52 that says that we fix our interest rate in order to cover all of our bond indebtedness and to support the loan operations. So essentially, we get a lot of questions about what's your default rate within the loan program. We have a whole variety of different ways that we present the default rate, but at the end of the day, the board sets an interest rate to cover all of our operating expenses, which is inclusive of our default rate. So if our default rate, if our default rate was 20%, it would be the board's obligation to set an interest rate on the loans in order to accommodate such a high default rate. Our default rate currently is on the order of 3 to 4%. So we have a very low default rate, but ultimately the default rate kind of becomes a moot point because the interest rate that we charge has to be sufficient to cover any defaulted loans that might occur. So this is kind of a minimal statement, but it's probably the most important statement on how the program is operated. Questions? So we are general obligation bonds because we have loan repayments that back up our bonding authority. We do not count against the state debt cap because we are not dependent on general revenue in order to pay back our bonds. So although we have the luxury to be a general obligation of the state, we're not counted negatively against the state debt cap. Normally, we are charged, or we're a part of the alternative minimum tax. There was a holiday for a period of 2 years that we were not subject to alternative minimum tax. The penalty we pay is about 85 basis points on our bonding when we are subject to A&T, and a lot of that really depends on kind of what the market demand is for our paper in the marketplace. So I think 85 basis points is probably a rule of thumb of the penalty that we pay because we are subject to alternative minimum tax. And then the last bullet here is bonds issued on or after 1986 are subject to arbitrage rebate requirements. When Dr. Alonzo and I started talking about the next presentation on the loan program for AOC, it was in and around arbitrage rebate, which is a fascinating topic, which we're going to go into in a little bit more detail. But it really is it's the limit that the Internal Revenue Service placed on tax-exempt bonding such that issuers couldn't essentially profit from issuing tax-exempt bonds and then investing those bonds in some other mechanism that allowed them to make profit off of it. So we're going to go into arbitrage for a couple of slides, and it really is the main reason why we're here today. Yes, sir.
You could tell I was going to ask you a question. I heard you, I hate to interrupt the flow of what is indeed the most glamorous part of our agency, but the statement I heard you say a minute ago, and there's not a bullet point on here, is that these bonds don't count against the state debt cap?
That's correct. Chapter 49 of the government code. Chapter 49 of the government code, if they have a pledged repayment stream, they do not count against the debt ceiling limit. So the calculations that the bond...
But because they're self-supporting.
Yes, sir.
In essence.
So the Bond Review Board, when they make information available to Senate Finance and the various committees at the legislature, they they have these elaborate tables and graphs and charts, and the coordinating board sits kind of outside of those debt ceiling calculations.
Are there other examples of bonds that don't count against the state debt cap?
I'm going to lean backwards and poll the audience.
I think mortgage.
The Water Development Board, any
Like veterans?
just both of the other participants in our subceiling, because they have a repayment stream that's dedicated to them, don't hit against the cap. So if I don't have any dedicated repayment streams, and the state truly is obligating general revenue to cover the repayment of the bonds, then those hit against the debt ceiling limit.
Well, I know in op-eds, there were rumblings of concern about some organized opposition to Proposition 3 based on increasing the state's debt, and they are bonds, but and if we did make the point in some of the op-ed pieces that were written that they're self-supporting, but I think this is a second strong point that I don't know how widely understood that is, that they don't count against the state's debt cap. So
we had, I guess, during the hearings that came about for SGR 50, it was a common question that came up, and all of our talking points and materials that we put together always made that point. And when there was a rushed call from the floor, it was asking about, does this hit against our debt ceiling? So it's been a common question that's been asked.
Inside the session, but I don't know how common it is in terms of public perception and media understanding is what I was driving at.
As you know, this is somewhat complicated. So if they're getting into that level of detail on that particular topic, I'm not sure. We can only say so much that it doesn't count, and we can provide the statutory that says it doesn't count, and we can send them to House research that says that it doesn't count. So you can only put the information out there so much. Ultimately, the consumer of the information has got to grasp the fact that it doesn't count. And we have a crack marketing staff here at the agency. I think we've done a very good job of messaging Proposition 3, and ultimately, the voters have to make the call.
Sure. But the bottom line is these are revenue bonds in essence. I mean, they've got your income stream that you're talking about, and they're not guaranteed by the full faith and credit of the state of Texas.
Well, they are guaranteed by the full faith and credit of the state of Texas. When we issue bonds, our official statement says State of Texas bonds, and then it says student loans underneath it. So that kind of the nuance that Chairman Heldenfels talks about is they are GO state debt. However, you have to take a step back and say they don't count against our debt limit. If if catastrophe strikes and every one of our students defaults, and we have no repayment streams to pay back our debt service, then the state of Texas is essentially obligated to make those debt service payments. Now, the likelihood of that happening is not very good, and we have 45 years of track record that says that it's never happened.
Of course, if that happens, we've got much bigger problems anyway.
Which usually is the next statement that people make, is that if that is indeed the problem, then we have much greater problems than that. Again, our criteria for making loans, we have credit requirements to make loans. We are not pushing money out the door to anybody that shows up. They have to have an ability to repay. I don't want to go into too much detail on the operations side because we'll talk a little bit about that later, but we are very aggressive and active in our pursuit of defaulted borrowers, and some people might claim that we're overly aggressive with pursuing our borrowers. But ultimately, it's an obligation to the state to repay those loans, and we take that very seriously in our operations.
And how often do we review this? How often do we review this default rate and adjust the interest rates to cover loan loss reserves or whatever?
We capture the current default rate every week, So we have a weekly assessment of what's going on. We, within our financial statements, record a default, and we set aside a allowance for doubtful accounts within our financial statements, which when we present our financial statements, you'll see the breakout of the different methods that we account for our allowance for doubtful accounts. So we set aside a relatively large reserve in order to cover those, and yet it's ultimately it's if the revenue is coming in on repayments is sufficient to cover our debt service payments, and kind of looking over the horizon, we don't have any major debt service obligations that are coming forward in the next couple of years. We are typically in excess of what we need on an annual basis.
So how often does the board review the interest rates too?
We typically we run cash flows annually, and from those cash flows, we'll assess the equity value of the fund, and then with our financial advisor, we'll make a recommendation to the commissioner of we need to keep the rates the same, we need to increase our rates, we have an opportunity to lower our rates, and the commissioner is the authority in order to set the rates. So we recently reset our rates from 6% to 5.25% this year, and I have a couple of charts that will help to kind of clarify how we were able to, in kind of this kind of market, this kind of environment, to lower our interest rates for student lending. So I think I'll keep answering your question over the next couple of slides. But we review it weekly, for lack of a, and we have all these. We'll get to the charts here in a minute, and boy, I hate to go back to arbitrage. We've had such a nice conversation.
On to arbitrage.
On to arbitrage. I apologize for reading this. I want to make sure I get this correct. For our purposes, our definition is excess profits earned from investments of tax-exempt bond proceeds in higher yielding investments. First Southwest we have a contract with First Southwest that performs our arbitrage calculations. It is Byzantine and complicated, and I'm not here to claim expertise in arbitrage calculations. I'm here to give you kind of the results of what their calculations show. There are two main buckets that the IRS looks at. There's non-purpose and the purpose. The non-purpose in our regards is we issue bonds. The funds go into the comptroller's office and our auxiliary fund, and they start accruing interest, start collecting interest based on the comptroller's rate of return. The last few years, we issue bonds at 4.5%. The comptroller pays 1%. We have negative arbitrage for our non-purpose. So the non-purpose part is what you do with the loan proceed, the bond proceeds that's not for the reason that you issued the bonds. We are very negative on our non-purpose arbitrage since 2007. The next piece is the purpose piece. Purpose is we issue bonds to make student loans. The IRS says you can make a 2% yield on top of the bond interest cost. So in my previous example, if we issued bonds at 4%, the IRS says you can yield 6% on your for purpose, and your arbitrage liability would be 0 at that particular point. Having said that, the next chart is we report our arbitrage liability annually on our financial reports. We recently got our preliminary numbers from First Southwest. This particular chart, although it looks like we're fishing for something, these are actually our historical trends on for-purpose arbitrage liability. And the blue dots that go just above the line and then are very, very negative going out over time is an example of what our arbitrage typically looks like on a for-purpose calculation. Because we issue bonds, we make loans at a slightly higher rate than what the bonds' interest costs are. We have a positive arbitrage until the loans start performing. And then when they enter into repayment, if we have defaults, if we have lack of performance on the loans, then we get into a negative arbitrage situation. To our best knowledge, we've never had a for-purpose positive arbitrage until now, which is another reason why we're coming to discuss this with you. The big red line on the top, very positive for-purpose, then it dips down, and then it trends back up again, and there's $1 million figure on the far right-hand side. This is our 2003 series. It's a variable rate note. We currently market it on a weekly basis. The weekly rates on variable rate on these notes run about 25 basis points, which is great. But the IRS says, no, you can't make any more than 2% over the purpose. So our purpose yield is very, very low right now, and our yield on these loans is relatively high. So we have a positive arbitrage situation for 2003. We run calculations every 5 years. So our next calculation for 2003 will be in 2013. So it's very likely, given the kind of the view over the horizon, short-term interest rates are still going to be low. The 2003 series, our interest obligation is going to be low, and the loans that were associated with that particular series are performing, and they're performing at 5.25% or 6%. So I would expect, and this is kind of perspective looking of, we'll probably have a payment that's going to come due to the IRS in 2013, as a result of the 2003 series. I don't want to make it sound really, really bad, because it's interest that we are not, it's not our interest at that point. It's the taxpayers of the United States interest at that point. Some mitigating things that we can do, this is kind of an odd situation because it's 2003, it's kind of done. We're just seeing what happens. You set the interest rate, and I'm going to go to the next slide, unless somebody has a specific question about this slide. And Chairman Hellenfels, this is my favorite slide, by the way.
Yeah, it would be.
So the top red line is essentially what the interest rate has been on our Cal portfolio over time. It says fixed rate bond. The blue squiggly line on the top very closely approximates if we issued fixed rate bonds, they would typically issue on the blue squiggly line. So our 2% yield calculation is pretty tight to what our loans are issued at. And then all of the other lines that have all flattened out over time, those are our variable rate notes. So we have 3 issues, 2003, 4, and 6, that are variable rate, that reset either weekly or monthly. And our reset rates are very, very low. So as we look at, because our bonds are on parity with each other, we're in a very, very strong interest payment for our bondholders. So when we lowered our interest rate to 5.25% this year, it was primarily as a result of the fact that we have a lot of debt that's variable rate that's paying out at a very, very low rate. So our obligation from a coordinating board standpoint is to make those savings, put that money back to students. So that was the primary driver in our ability to lower interest rates from 6 to 5.25%. Next year, we'll go look at it again and see where we're at. I don't know how much lower than 5.25%, because since 2007, we've been issuing fixed rate debt at 4 to 4.5%, so there's not as much room. Eventually, the short rate market's going to change, and interest rates are going to go up, and we don't want to be caught on the backside of having too low of an interest rate on our loans. Any questions on this slide?
Mr. Chairman? I just want to go back to this arbitrage thing, this $1.1 million or whatever on the 2003 issue, that in 2013 we're going to owe to the IRS. Is there any methodology, rather than sending that money to the Internal Revenue Service, that those loans be forgiven? I'd much rather see a student get it than the Internal Revenue Service.
Again, because arbitrage are calculated on the loans that are attributed to that series, you'd have to do something only for that series.
Right.
And because we issue loans on a parity notion, you would have to lower your interest rate on all of your loans, and then you're only impacting the 2003 series in the proportion that those loans are outstanding. I don't know that we could systematically go in and say, because you got a loan in 2003, we're going to forgive your interest or we're going to forgive your loan. You'd have to do it on a more broad scale.
Okay. So each one of them don't stand alone?
Each one of them stands alone for arbitrage. But from a strategy standpoint that you're discussing, we would have to look at our entire portfolio.
Okay.
And that's something that we've talked about. We have a little bit of a variable rate portfolio, but not very much. So we looked at lowering the interest rate on our variable rate notes, but the impact specific to this issue was so small, it becomes more of a operational headache than a benefit to the borrowers.
The liability would be the entire $1.1 million.
But I don't want to sound the alarms because there's still 2 years out. There's still 2 years of performance that has to happen. There's 2 years of interest rate changes that are likely to happen. Arbitrage, we've wanted to bring it to your attention for about the last 6 months because it's an issue that we live with from a kind of a frame of operation standpoint, but we hadn't really had an opportunity to have any kind of a discussion with the board members about our arbitrage liability, potential arbitrage liabilities. So if you have other suggestions like that, though, that's, we don't want to pay the IRS anything, right? We would like our arbitrage to be -1 or 0 or very negative. So whenever it's positive, that's always that's bad from an operational standpoint. Let's see. So I've talked a little bit about our variable rate debt, and perhaps we'll just skip right on to the next slide. So this slide's called flow of funds. And Dr. Alonso, I'm well into half of my time. Am I still engaged? Mr. Chair, are you all right? Okay. We essentially have two funds that we issue loans out of. The top fund, or Fund 387, I put these numbers on there because when you do see our financial statements, you'll see Fund 387 and Fund 601. Those are our bond funds that we issue loans out of. So when we get bond proceeds, they go into now the auxiliary fund, which is 601. And moving right along, flow of funds, the other part of that is the interest and sinking fund, which is Fund 388. That's essentially the fund that we accumulate all of our repayments in order to make our debt service payments. We do have an agreement with the Texas Safekeeping Trust Company. Due to some restrictions in our bond covenants, we do not keep our interest and sinking fund in the comptroller's pool because the comptroller makes certain investments that we're not authorized to make within our bond covenants. So we have a separate investment agreement with TTSTC, which is a subsidiary of the comptroller's office, essentially. It's still the comptroller's office, but it's a separate investment group. But don't think of investment as making more money. In this case, investment means making less money because we have very tight restrictions on what we can invest those funds in. I am going to shift gears into more program, unless somebody has a question. Anybody? We essentially make one loan product now out of the Hinson Hazelwood. It's called the College Access Loan. We've talked a little bit in and around it getting up to this point, so I won't go into a whole lot of details. It is very attractive from a student perspective because it looks and smells and tastes kind of like a federal loan. A lot of the same borrower benefits that are available to federal loans are also, the Cal product was tailored after the federal product. Within the loan program operation, we also run the Beyond Time program, which is the next slide. Currently, it's funded from general revenue and general or tuition set-asides. When the program started, it was funded out of excess proceeds from the loan program in 2004. So we are not currently making beyond time loans from any bond proceeds. Next. Just to give you a perspective of our disbursements over the last 4 years, the college access loan has been pretty steady between $80 and $100 million. We're on track this year probably to be in the same kind of $90 to $100 million range. The Beyond Time program, because it's funded separately and it's kind of had some fits and starts over the last 2 sessions, it fluctuates depending on what the appropriation level is. And when Beyond Time goes up, we typically have a little bit of a downtick in college access loans because it's better for a student to get a 0% forgivable loan as opposed to a 5.25% loan. So that's kind of a logical interplay between the two. Sir?
Most of the years I've been on this board, though, the Beyond Time usually carries one of, if not the largest UB amount because of it being under prescribed.
It does, except this year we more severely curtailed on UB authority on all of our programs, Beyond Time being one of them. And next year, hopefully when I come back and have the same conversation on maybe a little different topic, we'll be talking about the fact that the legislature hasn't given us spending authority for our set-aside collections in fiscal year 13. We can collect the money, but we can't spend the money until the next session reauthorizes the program, essentially. So there's going to be a very, very large Beyond Time cash balance at the end of fiscal year 13, just FYI. So they limited our spending authority, but not the authority for the institutions to send us set-asides. So we're going to generate a very large cash balance.
That's from the tuition set-asides?
Yes, sir. We're going to spend all the general revenue, and we're going to have a large tuition set-aside balance. Just real quickly, the federal, clearly we don't make any federal loans anymore since they suspended that particular program. We stopped making help loans last year, primarily we're trying to be as efficient as we possibly can. We're trying to be boring operationally. We want institutions not to have to, we want to make it as simple as possible. Kind of brief segue, I got a very nice letter from the financial aid director at TCU a couple weeks ago, and TCU has been one of our harshest critics over the years. And I got a very nice letter from the financial aid director kind of complimenting the coordinating board on how much improvements we've made and the support that we have tried to amass so that their students have a better access to the product and their the relationship has been good. So if your harshest critics are giving you kind of affirmations about things that are working, it's one of those letters that you get that's kind of an old, we're doing something right kind of a letter. So we'll talk a little bit about operations here, but we're automated. We don't hardly do any paper processing anymore. Most of our repayments come in electronically. We're doing all the things that I think that Chairman Heldenfels has been advocating for over the years of becoming more efficient in our operation and more effective for the students that use our products. So, very quickly, our loan portfolio is primarily college access loans. The little purple Judgment, I'll talk a little bit about that in just a minute. The Beyond Time portfolio is now 15% of our loan volume, which is relatively large. And the federal percentage is small and getting smaller. The loan portfolio, thank you, Sharon. The loan portfolio from a repayment, which is the green bucket, the in-school version, and deferment. So deferment are people that are not in school, but they're not in repayment either, but they're fixing to be in repayment. So the perspective of this is to look at how old the portfolio is. So we compared these figures to our figures from 3 years ago, 2008. and our portfolio generally is very, very stable. We have loans in repayment just about the same percentage now that we had 3 years ago. So we make loans, get them into school, get them out of school into repayment, and it's been very consistent over the years. If those fluctuated greatly, we'd have a separate presentation. From an allocation standpoint, we try to distribute the funds equitably between the independent colleges and universities and the public universities, which are our two primary users. While the allocations are equally distributed, most recently the independent universities have been more prolific in their use. I think previous boards have wanted to make sure that we have at the very least an equal access from a public-private perspective and not get too far one way or the other. Questions? The next slide really kind of talks to the electronic nature of our operation, so I won't spend a lot of time with that. Sharon, if you go to the next slide. So account servicing and default prevention. I just want to highlight here, we're very active and proactive in our engagement with borrowers from essentially the day that they enter into an agreement with the coordinating board until they've been paid in full. We did enter into an agreement, a more official agreement with the Office of Attorney General in 2009, where they do litigation and collections on behalf of the coordinating board, as is their responsibility from a state perspective. But we further refined that agreement. We actually shifted staff members to the OAG's office, and we've actually, in our new agreement that started this year, expanded their number of full-time equivalents that are working specifically on the loan program to help with our default collections, our litigation collections, and our post-judgment collections. So loans that we have a suit that we're still in the process of trying to seek repayment for. The next, sir.
I don't know if this is the type of loan the students are talking about, but this question came up today when the College for All Texans Foundation was meeting with some of the college advisors from the Advised Texas program. And the issue was deferment of their loans, like a student who graduates and chooses to go into the Peace Corps or other forms of public service can have their student loan deferred. The question was, can we do that for these students who choose to enter into, is it a 1 or 2 year service? I guess they could do it for 1 or 2 years then for Advised Texas, where they're placed on high school campuses, for those board members who are not familiar with this program. What are the, we want to pursue this for them. Is that something that we would do through?
So you're talking deferment, or you're talking
deferment,
forgiveness?
While they're in Advised Texas. Not forgiveness, but deferment.
I believe deferment, the specific deferment requirements are in rule. So there would be a rule that would be put forward for your consideration. We would, first and foremost have to protect the integrity of the program. So there would be again, back to cash flow analysis. We'd have to have our financial advisor run a cash flow projection that said you could afford to do, X, Y, and Z, and the integrity of the program would be protected. Typically, the counterpoint of that, because these are parity bonds, our first obligation is to the bond holder. So we would have to make sure that we didn't do anything that would jeopardize our ability to repay our bond holders. Is there space within our equity to do something like that? I certainly think so.
Mr. Chairman, I think it's important to point out that we're talking about those loans that those students, that the Advised Texas students have, that were issued by us, because I think some of them are they probably get either federal or private loans, and of course that would be out of our purview to change the rule on those, but it would not be out of our purview to pursue perhaps something similar to that for other type of loans.
The first step is getting more information on what loan debt those Advised Texas students hold. It could be all of the above, and then help them. With what we can change, let's move fast to change it. With what we can't, let's tell them where they need to go to get those rules changed and treated like the Peace Corps or Teach America or whatever else might qualify.
The only thing I would go take a step back from that is going back to Chapter 52, which is our statute, to make sure that we're not doing anything that contradicts our statutory authority. It starts to sound, if it's a special kind of deferment, you probably have some latitude within the rules to do that. If it's a different kind of a loan, you would likely have to have some statutory authority to do that. I'm just.
But in
just off
summary,
the top of my head.
we can look. We're going to look into that and do whatever we can within the statutes and.
My purpose is only to raise a sense of urgency about figuring it out.
Duly noted. The next
Monday would be fine.
Okay. So the next slide is just a real. This is a chart that I did. All the good-looking ones, Patrick Krishock put together. This is just a collection trend from the OAG's office. The top two lines are the trends for the last year and a half, 2 years now. The bottom line is we collect a lot more on our litigation accounts after our agreement with the OAG than we did before with our agreement with the OAG. And then the final slide is a real quick characterization of kind of some challenges that are ahead of us. The federal legislation, when it changed to eliminate the FELP program, put some very, very restrictive language that impacts the ability of state loan programs to be available and have students have easy access to avail themselves of those types of products. So the language is really federal loans are good for students and all private loans are not good for students, and we as a state are lumped in with the private loans. And we've been working with a 15-state consortium to try to wrestle with what kind of language can we put forward to remedy this particular situation. And as you might expect, it's difficult for 15 states that have completely different structure of organization to come up with language that's good for everybody. So we're continuing to work on that. We were at a conference a couple of weeks ago, the NASCAP conference, talking about the changes in the Pell program. And there's a sense from the financial aid community that we don't want to be too rushed to protect Pell and abandon interest subsidies on loans, because the financial benefit to students with a subsidy might be greater than the value of a Pell grant. So they are on a national basis wrestling with, let's do this thoughtfully, because it may be maybe in a student's best interest to continue to have a subsidized loan than to get an extra $500 Pell Grant. I know that probably sounds odd, but it doesn't take long to make up $500 when you have to pay interest on a $5,000 loan. So those are some of the issues that the folks that are in Washington are grappling with. And then I just want to bring back up, we tend to make equitable allocations on public and private. That's really the board needs to, if you have a strong opinion one way or the other, that's something that we can look at. And with that, I will yield the floor and answer any questions or happily leave. Not permanently, but just leave the table. Okay.
As discussed earlier, this does not require any action, so we can move to the next agenda item,
Perfect. Thank you.
which is auditing.
We've got a couple more reports under the deputy commissioners.
Okay.
So let me quickly, and those will go quickly. The next report that's listed on there is the report that we usually give on the federal stimulus funds that the coordinating board has administered on behalf of the governor's office. This is one of those standing reports that I mentioned earlier that this would probably be the final one. As the program, I am happy to report, has been successfully closed. I would like to give a couple of background points for this, for the benefit of those new board members who are not familiar with it. The state was awarded $723 million back in in the summer of 2009. Those in stimulus funds. The legislature appropriated those funds under Article 12 and asked the coordinating board to administer those on behalf of the governor's office. At that time, the commissioner asked that this program be provided oversight by the deputy commissioner because of the high visibility and the commitment that we made to the governor's office. So in a nutshell, we issued 222 subawards to 114 subrecipients. Most of those subrecipients were institutions of higher ed, but we had a few strange ones, strange to us, such as the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, the Texas Historical Commission, the Texas Commission on the Arts, the Texas Department of Agriculture, and a couple others. One of those, you will have a report on an audit that we conducted on TCEQ when Ruby comes up to make her audit reports. I can truly say that this program, the stimulus funds, the RR program, it has been one of the most audited, examined, reviewed, prodded, probed, looked at programs that I have ever been associated with. And I've been in this business for quite a while now. I'm pleased. I'm pleased that we've had that experience. But I'm also pleased to report that all of our audits, all of our reports, all of our examinations have come out positive. In fact, we're still going through the last one here with the federal audits, the audit of the federal funds. But as I said, we have closed out all the subawards. We've made all the reimbursements. We've drawn down all the federal money from the feds, and we have submitted our closeout report to the Department of Education. So I think that I can truthfully say it has been a success, Mr. Chairman. So we appreciate the opportunity to report on that. If there's any questions, I will be happy to answer.
That's wonderful. That's great.
They deserve a hand.
There's a lot of people involved in this and made it a success. The next report that I will give, and hopefully will be also the last one, is an update on the facility renovation that we negotiated back in 2010 as part of our lease renewal for this building. We've been working on this, on the renovations for approximately the last year or so, and we are in our last months of activity here. All 3 floors have been renovated. There's the last few details remaining on the outside of the building, the lobby, and right after this board meeting tomorrow, the configuration of this board room will take place, and we will have it ready for the December committee meetings. And it has to do with placing this dais in a more audience-friendly way, I guess is a way of putting it. So we're looking forward to that. Renovation process has been more lengthy, I guess that's the word, than we wanted, or lengthier than we thought. It's been noisy, it's been inconvenient, it's been a hassle, but by most accounts, successful. I want to express my appreciation to all the staff for putting up with the relocations and relocations again, and putting up with all the inconveniences and so forth. But especially to 2 people in the agency, Dennis Sills and Fino Quiroz, have taken the brunt of all the complaints. They were good troopers, have been. Most of the issues were not of their makings, but these 2 gentlemen took it all in stride and just kept smiling, or at least it looked like they were smiling, and kept on going. So I'm happy to report that our renovations are coming to a close, and better building than what we had before that. The third report.
Question. Just very briefly, besides the reconfiguration of the boardroom to make it more audience friendly, were there any other significant change orders or budget issues on the facilities renovation?
No, it was pretty much what we expected.
Okay.
Anticipated.
So the only change order is my fault.
Well, we're happy to accommodate that.
Mr. Chairman, how much savings did you get out of that renovation budget?
Turn your line.
Did you come under that?
Actually, yes. What is really good about the renegotiation of the lease is that we were able to get all of this renovations negotiated, but also negotiated for a lower rate than what we had previously. The leases for state government or for state offices are handled by the Texas Facilities Commission, and their comment to us was that they have never renegotiated a lease where we got more and we're able to pay less. So we're very, very pleased with that.
So does that mean we were paying too much before?
It means, fortunately, our lease came due during the start of the Great Recession, and a lot of desperate real estate owners.
Thank you.
Timing is everything.
I just want to make it clear that if we were paying too much, I did not negotiate that. I was not here.
That's exactly what I was waiting for. Thank you.
The third report that I would like to present is the financial report. We sent this out to you a couple of weeks ago with all the board materials. This report is presented quarterly and is designed to present our financial snapshot of the agency's budget at any given time. Today's report is for fiscal year 2011 and represents the year-end financial status. Let me go over just a little bit about the structure of the report, and then I'll respond to any specific questions that you may have. The budget, our coordinating board budget, as I was mentioning earlier to somebody, is pretty complex. It consists of two main parts. Operating budget, which is the amount that goes into the operations of the agency, mostly salaries, but negotiated lease also, a good term on the negotiated lease. Which is only about 4% of our total budget. The second part is what they refer to as trustee funds, which is in other terms sometimes known as flow-through funds. And that's 96% of our budget that we flow through to other state agencies or institutions or to other entities. On page 1 of your report outlines the approved operating budget by the sources of funds and by the uses. And it's just simply how we budget it out. Page 2 and 3 reflect the approved operating budget compared to, and it's broken out by the major strategies, and it gives us a status as of August 31st. As you can see, most of the funds have been encumbered or expended. One of the things that I think I would like to point out, because it's a question that often comes up, is you will see on the bottom of page 3 that out of the $44.8 million budget, operating budget, we have $3.5 million still remaining. Most of that fund, most of those $3.5 million are funds that are really not going to lapse. That includes, those funds includes our indirect strategy, which is funded both by general revenue and indirect costs and loan funds. So any savings there really goes back into the loan program. So it's not like a loss. We also have about $775,000 right in the purple, or the box right above that, of federal funds, which again, those are budgeted. Those carry over into the next year, so it's not like we're going to lapse that $775,000. The purple one, or the, I don't know what color it is, salmon, I guess, that where you see the Higher Education Policy Institute that has about a $230,000 balance. Those are funds that also carry over because those are private grant funds from the Houston Endowment. And then on the previous page, you will see the green box, which has the Hinson Hazelwood loan program that Dan just went over. And those funds, of course, just carry over and are available to either for operations the following year or for going back into the loan program. On page 4 through 11, we list all the adjustments to the budget during the year. I certainly don't have any intentions of going over those, but I just want to point out that this is in keeping with our commitment to full transparency and disclosure of all budget transactions. This year, the adjustments are a little bit more than normal because, as those of you that were on the board, or even if you weren't, you probably heard, the state asked us to come in with budget cuts during the year or during the biennium, and those adjustments are reflected on those pages through 14. Excuse me, through page 11. Page 12 and 13 is the same report for the trustee funds that I talked about earlier. and that you previously saw for the operating budget. Again, this is the status of our accounts as of August 31st, 2011. Page 14 is this was a request by a specific board member when we first started managing the ARA funds. And I've already given you the update on that. And unless there's any questions, I will not go into detail there because in essence what it is the funds have been spent. And then the last two pages cover the loan funds, which Dan just reported on. So I will not repeat any of his points, but we'll be happy to respond to any questions on that or any of the financial report.
Those are all the reports?
That's the end of the financial report. We have one more report by our Assistant Commissioner for IT Services. Are we ready for that?
Yes.
Harold?
So at this point, this is end of the fiscal year.
Yes.
So are the auditors working now, the independent auditors, or do they come in? What is the schedule?
On the audit for our financials, they will come in. I believe we issued an RFP as we were authorized at the July board meeting. The RFPs were due, I believe, on the 21st of September. We will analyze and then we will issue a contract. They will come in as soon as we have a contract in place and be ready to report at the July board meeting, which is where we usually bring that audit to that meeting. So we're on track for that. Okay. Is there no other questions on the financial report then? For our last report under the Deputy Commissioner's report, I'd like to call on our Assistant Commissioner for Information Services, Sid Hoskins, to report on our initiatives in his department and to provide you an update on the implementation of lean processes. And he has with him Dr. Charles Harris, who has been helping us with the implementation of lean. Sid, turn it over to you.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, committee members. Good to see you all again. My name is Sid Hodgson. I'm the Assistant Commissioner for Information Solutions and Services for the agency. The former chairman of this committee had requested that I provide an update at subsequent meetings on the status of our IT initiatives, specifically those related to the introduction of Lean Six Sigma to the organization. Dr. Harris, as Dr. Alonso alluded to, has been our Six Sigma Lean consultant. He's been with us since the end of May, I guess. And his official engagement actually ended at the end of September. Unfortunately, due to some health problems, Dr. Harris was unable to complete all of the work we wanted him to do, and quite kindly has agreed to keep his involvement going for an extra couple of months at no cost to the agency. So for that, we're very grateful to him for his service on our behalf. Next slide, please. As you can see, there's several initiatives that are underway related to our lean initiatives. The first one really focuses on the whole area of client demand, how we handle the intake of work coming into the department, and how we manage that work, how we prioritize it. And the changes there really involve not only changes to our processes, but also new tools to allow us to manage our application portfolio, project portfolio better manage our resource allocations. We have a couple of software products that we're currently configuring and intend to introduce to the agency clients and our IT staff within the next month or two. The reason we haven't yet introduced those software products is first we had to define the processes and then configure the software to support those processes. Another area of attention has been project management. And quite frankly, we haven't really done a good job of project management within IT in the past. What I've been focusing on is really getting our PMs educated, getting them certified, instituting better project management methodologies and procedures. We're also introducing a new way of developing applications called Agile, and I'll say more about that in a couple of minutes. Project portfolio management using that new software product I alluded to is being introduced, as well as standard templates for project management and really overhauling the entire project management process using Lean Six Sigma DMAIC process. That means define, measure, analyze, improve, and control. It's a Lean Six Sigma term, which Dr. Harris could explain better than myself. Resource management, I mentioned, is a key area in terms of better managing our resources and allocating them to projects more effectively. That involves defining the roles of staff, and what we've tried to do is identify areas where people can really perform more than one role to more effectively utilize the resources. We've also had to develop load factors, and what I mean by that is when you're looking at an allocation of an individual to a project, you can't assume they're available 100% of the time. We have to look at their other responsibilities, their other duties in supporting existing applications, or time off for training or vacation or whatever. So we had to develop that. We're also using the Enotus software product to manage our resources, keep track of their allocations, utilizations. It has a time reporting component we'll introduce later on. System development lifecycle is an area what we've really undergone a lot of changes. We're transitioning from a waterfall approach to developing applications to a more agile. By waterfall, what I mean is the traditional way of developing applications or systems over the past 40 years has been that a need is identified, and then a business analyst would produce a requirements document, a functional requirements document, turn it over to a designer to develop a detailed design, who turns it over to a programmer who does the coding, turns it over to a tester, quality assurance, to do the quality assurance. And then at the end of the process, which may be a couple of months to a couple of years, you bring back the end user and say, is this what you wanted? And quite often it's not. So what we've gone to is a more agile approach, where it's more of an iterative approach. And what we're doing there is conducting what's called sprints, 2-week sprints. So at the beginning of the sprint, we actually sit down with the user and with representatives of the various IT functional areas, the designers, the developers, the testers, and really define in the next 2 weeks what do we want to accomplish. What functionality do we actually want to build in the next 2-week period? At the end of the 2-week sprint, that group reconvenes and the users look at working software. So rather than coming back 2 years later and seeing the software for the first time and determining, well, that's not what we wanted, every 2 weeks they're coming back, looking at the software that's been developed in that 2-week period, working software, and saying yay or nay, and let's proceed from here. I'll say more about a couple of those projects in a minute. The other thing I talked about in the last meeting was the establishment of a new function within IT, and that is the business relationship manager position, and we're staffing 3 of those, and currently we're screening the candidates for those 3 positions. But the objective there is to really more closely align the IT strategy with the business priorities and needs of the agency, improve the communication between ourselves and the business program areas, and those people will be physically located in the program areas, working daily with the business people, not in IT. What we hope to accomplish there is that they will have the opportunity to identify areas where IT can improve the operations, and also, when there is a new need identified, to document that need better, to perform a cost benefit if appropriate, and also rank those requests in terms of priority, or triage them. And then when they come to the IT steering committee will have better information on which to make their decisions in terms of what the priorities should be for IT initiatives. So we're quite excited about that initiative, and I can't wait to get the people on board. Next slide, Sharon. A couple other things. Certifications. I mentioned the project management certifications. In addition to that, with Dr. Harris's help, we've actually been certifying 20 members of ISS staff as Green Lean Six Sigma experts. That entailed 32 hours minimum of classwork on the part of those individuals, and then an examination, which in fact, as we speak this week, those examinations are taking place. In addition to those people, there are also 3 people who will be pursuing black belt certifications in Lean Six Sigma, 3 of our quality assurance people, and we anticipate they'll complete their certifications by the end of this calendar year. Project management certifications, again, we've invested in providing our people with project management training. They've taken their certifications in the case of 2 of them. They've passed their certifications and are now certified by the Project Management Institute as project management professionals. The 3rd one has completed the coursework and will take the certification exam in the next little while. I must commend those people. They did a lot of hard work there. They did a lot of it on their own time in terms of studying and coursework, nights and weekends, so it's really going to help us going forward. Lean Agile projects underway. I mentioned a new methodology. The first system we used that on with pilot project, if you like, was the accountability system and planning and accountability area. And that was a good pilot project for us. We brought in an Agile consultant to assist us, show us the way. The reason that was a good candidate is because, first of all, we had a client and Susan Brown's people who were very anxious to undertake that and be our guinea pigs, if you like, but also because this is something that we do every year, so we had a basis for comparison. And what we found, and I don't think Susan's here, but hope she won't mind me saying, I think they were pretty pleased with the whole process and the new way of developing system from the feedback I got at the steering committee. And also we found that roughly it improved our productivity in doing that work by around 50% over our experience in previous years in terms of the turnaround time, resources taken, and so on. So I think it's quite positive in terms of this new approach to developing our systems. We have another
Can I interrupt you, Sid, just
yes,
a second? So how did you measure that 50%?
That was based on feedback from the client area in terms of their view of what it took previous years to get that work accomplished and the length of time it took to get that work accomplished.
Basically the number of days from the identification of need to
days and
delivering
resources
to the end
involved. Right. So that's why that was a good candidate, because we had something to base it on, whereas the other applications, for the most part, are new requirements. So it's kind of difficult to compare because every application is different. But that was a good candidate for that reason. So. We have 2 other Agile projects underway. I won't go into detail, but the graduate program review system is underway, due for completion mid-November, and we have a 3rd one that started this week, the Workforce Education Course Manual project. A couple of other initiatives not in IT, but I just thought I'd highlight. HR has also had a, Human Resources Division has also had a lean consultant assisting them for a couple of months to look at their processes, and a lot of them were very heavily manual, process-oriented, and a lot of duplication of activities, so that consultant assisted them in defining kind of a roadmap to how they can improve those HR processes. A lot of it will involve automation. Their current databases are scattered. They're not very effective. So it'll be a matter of prioritizing those and finding the resources to address those requirements. Lastly, Dr. Alonso plans to staff a full-time position, a lean process director, to maintain the momentum that we've started and sustain the lean effort going forward throughout the agency. So I look forward to seeing that person brought on board. Lastly, the last slide, this may appear to be very cosmetic, and it is in some respects, but it was very important to me. We've renamed our division from Information Technology Services to Information Solutions and Services. And what I wanted to convey was the message that we're not here only to provide fancy tools and the latest toys and technology to agency staff. We're here to assist the business people and be a partner with the business people in developing solutions to their business needs. So that was a message I felt important to get across. We also renamed our quality and testing group to client relations and delivery excellence. The BRM's business relationship manager positions will report in there. We've also planned to staff a tech writing training person to improve the quality of our technical writing and training delivered to agency staff. And we've expanded the role of that group, really, so not only testing of software and quality assurance on testing on software, but they'll also be responsible for riding herd, if you like, on the other sections of IT to make sure we're adhering to our new processes, our new methodologies, our new standards. So that'll be another role for that quality group to undertake. that in a nutshell is where we are with that. It was very quick. You have in front of you, I believe, the Leaning Forward newsletter, which goes into a lot more detail on some of these things than I've been able to in the time available. But Dr. Harris and I would be happy to respond to any questions.
I have a question. Can we apply these lean processes to a loan collection program that we have outsourced to, I guess,
Attorney General's
office? Yes.
I think Dan may be the best person to answer that question. That's an external agency. Certainly any internal activity can benefit from lean methodologies and processes. I'm sure the chairman has more experience than I do with that. But certainly I think any internal process, an external process outside of our purview, I'm not sure.
We have subcontracted this program to the other agency. And
Attorney General.
it's really our loan collection program.
Yes,
How
sir.
can we optimize our loan collection program applying this lean technology? And if we are getting so much benefit, 50% benefit here and 40% there, why can't we apply the same thing to loan collection program?
Dan, would you care to comment? The problem I see is that that's the Attorney General's department that handles that activity. It's not internal to our organization.
So I think I understand your question from the way I view lean process. Agile is systematic from a processing standpoint, as opposed to the OAG and our default prevention folks that work across the hall would implement the processes and methodologies that would have been developed in some other kind of a lean environment. And in a lot of regards, we've done some of that. It hasn't been called lean over the years, but I'm not exactly sure how to answer your question, and it probably would be better for me to visit with you afterwards so that I understand exactly what your question is. I don't want to venture off into a tangent that's not addressing what your concern is.
No problem. Last time when we had a meeting, I was talking about 80-20 rule, where 80% effort is spent on collecting 20% of the loans. That's what I'm referring to. And the question came up last time also, and I don't think that we have got any kind of explanation what percentage of the loans are below $1,000, are below $100, are below $5,000, and how much money is being spent in collecting those loans.
Well, and we can certainly get that information for you. And I apologize if we failed to do that previously. We have thresholds. The OAG's office doesn't go after low value targets. I hate to call former students targets, but there is an
only if they don't pay.
There are provisions to deem an account as being uncollectible if they've not made payment in the last 10 years, I believe, if the balance is less than $1,000, if your 20% characterization, there's already provisions so that we don't spend any time and effort collecting on those. The OAG is very sensitive to going after high value. We actually want them to broaden their reach into lower value, because ultimately, if the OAG doesn't pursue them, we have no other remedies to collect. So we need for the OAG to litigate and pursue borrowers, because if they go below such a threshold, we have no other recourse other than to pester with phone calls, which is not a very good use of our resources. So from an efficiency standpoint, we're very systematic up to 150 days, and we, through mail, phone calls, default prevention, pursue borrowers at 150 days. At 150 days, they get a letter from the OAG, and that account gets turned over to the OAG for further efforts. I think our return on investment, which ultimately is the proof of the pudding, The OAG, the amount of money that we expend at the OAG is probably on the order of $400,000 or $500,000 a year for our contracted services, and the collections that they have on litigated accounts are about $6 million a year. So we feel like, from an investment standpoint, we are getting a very, very large return on our investment, specifically with the OAG and within our own internal operations as well. That doesn't really get to your question, though, about implementation of lean strategies on collection efforts. But
Well, let me take a stab. Chairman Argowal, we made, as an agency, the strategic decision to outsource that collection as an approach to efficiency. But the broader question, and this may or may not get to what you were asking, but the broader question is, in what areas can we apply these lean Six Sigma processes? And the answer is every process in this agency, because every process inherently has some waste which can be improved and squeezed out of the process. So as Arturo can tell you, I've encouraged him more than once to, and I appreciate, Sid essentially was the volunteer guinea pig for his department. So I appreciate Sid's willingness to let this start in his department, but I hope to see it spread throughout the agency, including the departments on David's side of the house as well as Arturo's. It's not just for back office business operations. It's for what we do academically as well.
Dr. Harris, on behalf of the board, I really appreciate your helping us in spite of your health problem. Thank you very much for continuing to help us.
Well, Mr. Chairman, it's not a matter of graciousness. It's a matter of integrity. And if all of you folks can give your time in public service, I'm a resident of the state of Texas with kids and grandkids that will be in college too, and I'd like to see this agency as prosperous and as healthy and as efficient as it possibly can be. And I need to extend some thanks also. I especially thank Dr. Alonzo for leading off, demonstrating the commissioner's support and his support for the Lean Six Sigma implementation. Executive support and board support is absolutely mandatory with something like this. And you saw our last issue of our newsletter. Chairman Heldenfels gave us an excellent article in that very well addressed it. And I would confirm a couple of things and give you one hope of some future data. After doing my initial assessment and relying very heavily on a magnificent assessment done by Sid as he came in early this year as CIO, I estimated that a 30 to 50% improvement in the Information Systems Department was absolutely possible. I think that is at least what will be achieved. The missing piece of the pie was simply the measurement of time, effort in work over past years. It was well known when a project started and when a project ended, but the man hours and everything else going into that, totally unknown, so you're just left guessing at what your efficiency really is. With the implementation of Lean Six Sigma and Agile now, that information is being captured. We are capturing the effort. And data points will now begin to be established as we bring the Six Sigma online over the next couple of months and the Anotis product that Sid had selected before, so that you have hope and every reason to expect that in the next year, say by next summer toward the end of your fiscal year, you'll be able to look back and to say, we achieved this much savings, we are this much more efficient, and here's the data. So you're to be congratulated on your vision in bringing this, especially Chairman Heldenfels. I know the strong push you've put on it for a long while. And now that I'm not on Sid's payroll anymore, I can add one more thing. You're to be congratulated in the selection of your CIO. I came in when it was a matter of history that he had made the decision to do the Lean Six Sigma. He had made the decision to bring the most compatible development environment possible for Lean Six Sigma, which is Agile. He had selected Initas. And I really would like to have credit for all of that since my arrival on the scene, but all of that was pre-decided. And it all fit and fishtailed very beautifully into the Lean Six Sigma implementation. So you might know, I know he would never say it himself, and I don't want to embarrass him too much, but a great vote of thanks goes to this gentleman right here for the professionalism and the insight to make these decisions and to move forward, because it's not an easy thing to do.
Thank you very much, sir, Dr. Harris and Sid. Thank you very much
Thank
for
you.
what
I
you are doing.
apologize
Keep
for
up the
taking
good work.
more than planned. Thank you, sir.
Keep up the good work. Thank you.
For our new board members, I just want to add that what we've just begun here in this agency is, we've been encouraging our institutions, our community colleges and our four-year institutions to take this same path on lean continuous improvement, but I didn't feel like we could be very effective in making that argument unless we led by example. So, Arturo, I appreciate this initiative and the work that Sid and Dr. Harris and the rest of the team have done.
Thank you.
Next
Yeah,
agenda.
that concludes the Deputy Commissioner's report, and we're ready to move to the next agenda item.
All right, great. Next agenda item is 4A. This is an update on external audit reports. Ruby Garcia will give an update on TCEQ, ARA, and TERP grants. Ms. Garcia. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chairman, board members. Is that awfully loud? Is that better? Agenda item 4A is an audit, or rather a agreed upon procedures project that was performed related to ARA, and it was at the Texas Commission, TCEQ, and it pertained to the TERP program. The report noted that there were no significant issues, and there were a few areas of improvement that were noted. Personally, what I did was coordinate that particular project. I looked at the agreed upon procedures before they were approved and performed by the external auditor, Clifton Gunderson. We also looked at the draft audit report, coordinated it with TCEQ, and we worked on the management responses together. Are there any questions about that particular report? I correct myself, they were agreed upon procedures.
Board members, any questions?
Thank you.
There are no questions. We can move on to the next item. The agenda item 4B is discussion of 7 internal audit reports. This item is a reporting item only and does not require committee's action. And Ms. Garcia will take the committee through each one of these reports. Ms.
Okay.
Garcia.
Yes, the first report was a report of financial aid at Texas Tech University. Generally, they did comply with all of the required criteria. There was one exception that was noted, and we reported it in the one finding. It had to do with one particular student in our sample that received an award. The award had gone through their process. It was not approved. Subsequently, there was a call made about that particular grant, and there was an error made by the university. The grant award was made to the student. Subsequently, after we noted it in our during our audit field work, they did correct that error, and the university refunded the money to us, and they also agreed with the finding. Are there any questions?
Just a question. I guess out of 17 million, there was a $3,040 error. Is that fairly common, or is it? I mean, that's not. I mean, it's important, I guess, to monitor the money, but it's not a material thing in an audit this large, is it?
Yes, I would agree with that. It was noted because the error was it was performed by one of their staff members, and we felt it was important to let the university know that the process that they have in place was not followed by their staff member. Otherwise, yes, it was a very small dollar amount.
Okay.
Are there any other questions? I would like to proceed to the next agenda item. Agenda item B2, 4B2, relates to an internal program that we audited, the Family Practice Residency Program. This particular program, we noted one area of improvement, and that had to do with the performance, the oversight performance was being performed by by a contracted party, and due to budget cuts, that will no longer be performed externally. And so we wanted to note that the procedures and guidelines related to the program will need to be updated, and in fact, the program was in the process of doing such during completion of the reporting phase of the audit. Are there any other questions?
Is there funding for this program in the coming biennium, or the biennium we've just entered?
To my understanding, yes, there is.
Okay. So there will be something to audit.
Yes. Any other questions? And we will follow up just on the updated procedures and guidelines for that program. Are there any other questions? Okay. I would like to move on to agenda.
I have one question. That program, is that money that goes directly to physicians above Medicaid payments? Is that what it is? And how are those?
My understanding is that this actually is used for residency programs, not to physicians.
Okay. Just to the programs, not directly.
And they do directly, they do use those directly for residents.
Was McLennan County the only one that got the grant, or?
No, there were several counties. This happens to be the one.
The one you audited?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? I would like to move on to agenda item 4B3. And this also was an audit of an internal program, the contract management process. And we did scope this work specifically. We scoped out federal audits, and the reason for that is that federal funds are very well covered through other audits, both the A133 annual audit. They were also covered during the financial audits and audits of ARA. So we really focused on other types of contracts. We did not have any findings associated with those particular contracts. We looked at our new automated system that we use, and we also looked at the proper execution of the contracts authority and approval of those contracts in accordance to our administrative rule 1.16. Are there any questions associated with that particular audit? Okay. At this point, I'd like to move to the next agenda item 4B4. This is our first follow-up. The follow-up was of the Teach for Texas Loan Repayment Assistance Program. This particular audit initially had three recommendations, and there is one recommendation that is currently in progress, and the reason for that is that we have moved to a new automated system, and we will be using that for the first time during our next cycle, which will be in April of 2012 for this particular type of assistance. Are there any questions related to that follow-up audit? I would like to move to the next agenda item for B5, and this is a follow-up of the tuition equalization grant. There were 4 findings, and all of these findings have been implemented. Are there any questions related to this follow-up audit? I'd like to move to item 4B6. This particular follow-up related to the Beyond Time Loan Repayment Program, and that particular audit had 4 findings or recommendations, and there is one in progress. The one that is in progress relates to the institutions Beyond Time set aside. Sorry, the word escaped me. The set aside that they provide us by statute. And what we are doing is working with the institutions to provide them guidance so that they can calculate the particular set aside. Are there any questions related to that?
Rubio,
Yes.
well, you've got the expected completion date in here, and looks like, is this 3 facets, I guess, of one recommendation? Observation number 2. So all A, B, and C are all in progress and will be complete by January 31st?
Yes, that is correct. There were three recommendations, and sometimes a recommendation may have more than one component to it.
So come January 31st, who is responsible for reporting that those have been, how will we know those were successfully completed?
Dan Weaver's area is responsible for that, and we will know that because we...
Lots of colored charts to...
Yeah. We will know that because we will validate the procedures and follow up on that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? No? I'd like to move on to the last follow-up agenda item 4B7, and this particular one relates to the human resources management audit. Initially, we had 7 recommendations, and there is one that is in progress. I have to say that it is at the very last stages of being put in place. We are in the process of finalizing procedures for one of the areas. So we're very close to verifying completion of all of those findings.
That was very quick. Any other questions for Ms. Garcia? We are about to complete our agenda here,
Thank you. We have one more agenda item, if I may move to it. Agenda item 4C. And this particular agenda item does require action by the committee. This is a statutorily required report that is provided to oversight bodies, and it is an annual report of audit activities. It has several components, and the actual report was provided in the items that were sent to you. would you like for me to go over it briefly, or are there any questions about the report? The report is due October 31st, no later than October 31st, to the State Auditor's Office.
How do we decide who to audit, who not to audit, or is this a random process? Or,
Well, it's not a random process. It is a very systematic process that we use. It is a risk-based process. This year we used an automated system to capture the data that we use. We first identify the agency's audit areas or auditable units. We then will identify risk factors, the probability of those risks occurring, and we also weigh those risk factors. We also obtain management input related to the auditable units to ensure we have covered all of the different areas that we are responsible for. We also ask management to provide their input with respect to the risk rating, probability, and the risk factor as well. Once we perform that risk assessment, then we have a overall rating for each particular area that is subject to audit. We then will prioritize those. There is some auditor judgment that goes into that. We also consider environmental concerns, management concerns, any risk associated with opportunities for fraud, any legislative interests, budgetary cuts, changes in in management or automated systems. There are a lot of different things that go into that. But all said and done, it is a systematic process. We use the risk-based methodology with management input. We identify the areas. We develop the annual audit plan. We will, with the annual audit plan that we provided in July for your approval, recommendation and approval, we identified the potential audit projects and provided some overall objectives and inherent risk associated with each of the areas. We did that so that, one, for your consideration, to provide us a starting point. When we perform a particular audit, there are different phases. The planning phase, we actually get into the nuts and bolts of the particular area under audit. We look at all the statutory requirements, the rules, policies, procedures, guidance, expectations that we have of our programs or institutions of higher education. We will work with our program management to get their input, identify the potential criteria, refine the objectives, and perform a risk assessment if it is a broad topic we're looking at, develop the audit procedures, the audit program, and then actually begin our test work, and there are other components. But
great, thank you. Any other questions?
I have a question. Pardon me? When you say systematic plan for audit,
yes.
And obviously you're spending almost 56% of your time on the audits for the institutions. Is there a cycle that at least every 5 years or at least every 3 years or every 7 years that every institution should be?
There is not a statutory requirement that says we have to go out to a particular institution within a given time. However, we do consider the time since last audit. We consider not only the time since we've been to an institution, but how long has it been since the state auditors audited them. During our planning phase, we also look at any federal audits as well of particular institutions, any program audits, independent audits. But that's in the planning phase. Once we've identified the school we want to visit, we personally, within our methodology, we do not have a time frame as far as how frequently we should or need to go out there. Primarily that ties to resources. However, I can say that we do work with the internal auditors at the particular universities and institutions of higher education. We also, this year, we are planning a slightly different methodology so that we can maximize our limited audit resources, and that is in addition to performing site visits, we will be performing some desk audits and also some data analysis, because as an agency we do receive much data from institutions to use.
Pardon me. As a matter of practice, is there a number, 5-year, 7-year, 10-year, that would automatically trigger? I understand it's not a statutory requirement,
Right.
but would trigger that say, hey, it's been 7 years, or it's been 10 years, or it's been 20 years, that we need to go and do that. And same thing on your, special projects or larger programs.
We use a 0 years since last audit. In other words, a recent audit, 3 years and 5 years in our risk assessment to rate the institutions for that particular factor. And we weigh the factors, so those institutions that have never been audited will be higher on our assessment.
Okay, thanks.
There is some mathematical model or algorithm that you use to identify the institutions to be audited. Is that correct?
Yes, we use our risk assessment will identify those institutions that are at higher risk to us based on various factors.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Garcia.
You're welcome.
Any other questions?
I've got just a couple, and kind of a follow-up to part of what Munir was saying. In the 2012 plan, Ruby, the 80% that is allocated in the department's time to audits is divided 40% to our own agency operations, 20% to institutions of higher ed, and 20% to audits requested by the board and management, which I assume there's no detail because you can't anticipate what those requests might be. Is the 20%, my initial question was going to be, are we sure that is going to be sufficient when it comes to auditing institutions of higher education? But I think maybe a better way to ask that would be, how does that compare benchmark-wise to the percentage of our audit from recent years, 2010, 2011, that went to institutions of higher ed versus our own internal agencies? And then from a historical standpoint, can you kind of anticipate, it happens, but it's rare to get a request from the board, but you may get requests from management. Do those requests tend to be for institutions outside as opposed to internal operations?
Yes, they tend to be for institutions. And I might also add that although we did reduce compared to prior years, and we've only been doing audits of institutions for about 3 or 4 years. So compared to those annual audit plans, it is a reduced percentage overall, but I might add that we are going about in using our resources differently this year. That is, we're incorporating the desk audits and analysis of the data that's reported to us to identify any areas of improvement to better maximize our resources. We also, in the past, we had one type of audit that we did at financial institutions of higher education. This year, we've actually doubled the type of audits. We have 2 different areas that we're focusing on. So I would like to say we're increasing coverage, although percentage-wise it may appear that we are doing less. We're actually doing more with less. I might also add that of the programmatic audits that we're performing, if you look at those, some of those really are also related to financial aid, which would allow us to, during field work, test our programmatic requirements at the institutions if we choose to do that. So I do believe that given the resources that we have going forward, we are focusing, I believe, more on institutions of higher education than we have in the past by doubling the areas of audit, doing different types of reviews, and also incorporating testing of the institutions when we do our programmatic audits.
So you're in essence, you're budgeting less audit staff time, but you're casting a wider net with the methodology you're using.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And just out of curiosity, what has, and I'm all for getting, doing more with less. That's the mantra around state government these days. But what was the percentage of staff time allocated, just ballpark, over the last 3 or 4 years to outside institutions?
I would say 40% of staff time. But you have to consider that some of that time was travel time. With desk reviews and data analysis, we would eliminate that. So.
Yeah, that's part of that, doing more with less.
Yes, absolutely. And I might also add that I have touched base with Sid regarding the Lean Six Sigma process, and we definitely want to take advantage of that as well.
Good. Thank you.
Right. If there are no other questions, may I have a motion to adopt the Commissioner's recommendation to the Committee for approval of the annual internal audit report for fiscal year 2011?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much.
This concludes the Committee on Agency Operations meeting, and now I can accept a motion for adjournment. Do I have
questions?
Yeah.
This is just general. I was wondering what the agency, with the state budget cutbacks and everything, what was the impact on the agency? FTEs, general budget, just nothing
Alonzo can
specific.
answer
You
that.
don't have to go into a lot of detail. I just need kind of a summary.
We will reduce 36 FTEs
Okay.
from the last biennium. So we are now at 275. We were at 309 roughly. Our budget cuts, I don't remember the percentage, Linda, but it's roughly about 10%. The total budget. But between 12 and 15%. So.
Okay. So today I heard that you're adding 4 FTEs. Are you able to do that through attrition? IT or ISS is going to have 3 new positions, and you've asked for another position. Are those being through attrition? Your people are retiring or something, and you're changing job descriptions?
That's right. Those were positions that were that were already budgeted and
see.
included in there. So
Okay.
we're just reusing those FTEs.
Okay. That makes
But
sense.
we're not really adding any FTEs because we did cut 36.
But it was within your cut budget that you'd already.
It was within the 275 that we ended up with
Okay.
of our FTE cap.
Well, if there is no other question, may I have a motion to adjourn the meeting, please?
Second.
It has been moved, seconded, and all in favor? Aye.
Can a non-committee member oppose that?
Yes, your vote just won't count.
Durga is in a hurry to leave.
Yeah, it just won't count.
You are not going to stop me.
Christmas celebration.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So what do you say?